When Jack Sterling makes a lewd comment in French about a waitress during a business meeting, expecting it to go unnoticed, she shuts him down with a flawless comeback in the same language. Obsessed by the humiliation, he discovers that Claire is a brilliant former programmer who walked away from Silicon Valley, haunted by moral guilt. To win her over, he'll have to choose between his billions and his conscience. Jack Sterling moves through the restaurant, terroir, like a predator in his natural territory. The establishment, nestled among the vineyards of Woodside, is where Silicon Valley billionaires close deals that shape the future of humanity, between glasses of Bordeaux and plates from a Michelin-starred chef. At 42, Jack is the personification of the "move fast and break things" mantra. And he's broken far more than apps and business models over the 2 decades he spent building his empire. Sterling and Thorne Capital isn't just a venture capital firm. It's a machine for turning ideas into billions, dreams into monopolies. Jack knows that every startup he funds could either revolutionize the world or destroy it, and that moral ambiguity has never cost him a wink of sleep. He sleeps perfectly well in his minimalist Atherton mansion, surrounded by modern art that costs more than the GDP of small countries. His intellect is a razor's edge that cuts through corporate slide decks, financial spreadsheets, and inflated egos with the same lethal ease. Fluent in 5 languages, a Stanford grad with an MBA from Wharton, Jack wields his sophistication like a social weapon. When he speaks French with an impeccable Parisian accent or quotes German philosophy during negotiations, it's not erudition, it's psychological dominance. On this particular evening, as he watches 3 nervous European founders await his approval for a $50 million investment, Jack feels the familiar rush of absolute power. They depend on his word to turn their algorithms into reality. He decides who lives and who dies in the innovation ecosystem. He is God in an Armani suit. The waitress approaches the table with the professional poise of someone who has served hundreds of tycoons before him. Jack barely registers her face. To him, the staff are part of the decor, functional elements that facilitate his comfort, but something in her movements, the way she carries herself with quiet confidence, awakens his predatory instinct. As she arranges the plates, Jack leans toward the European founders and whispers in French, convinced a Californian waitress would never understand. Regardez cette taille. J'aimerais explorer chaque courbe de ce corps exquis après le dîner. His voice carries the arrogance of a man who believes he possesses not just financial power, but cultural invisibility. The founders laugh nervously, clearly uncomfortable, but unable to confront the man who holds their future in his hands. Jack smirks with satisfaction, savoring their discomfort like an appetizer. It's just one more demonstration that he can do anything, say anything, without consequence. Then Claire Chen slowly straightens up, places the last wineglass on the table, and meets his gaze with eyes burning with controlled indignation. When she speaks, her Parisian French is crystal clear in the sudden silence. Merci pour le commentaire sur mon corps, Monsieur Sterling, mais je préfère que vous évaluiez la qualité du service, pas mes courbes. Et peut-être, apprenez les bonnes manières avant votre prochaine sortie en public. Thank you for the comment on my body, Mr. Sterling, but I'd prefer you evaluate the quality of the service, not my curves. And perhaps, learn some manners before your next public outing. The entire restaurant seems to hold its breath. The silence that follows is more devastating than any explosion. Jack feels the blood drain from his face as he absorbs the magnitude of what has just happened. He was not only understood but publicly eviscerated, in flawless French, by someone he considered invisible. The waitress doesn't just speak the language, she commands it with an accent that would rival a Parisian native. The European founders avoid his gaze, suddenly fascinated by their own plates. Whispered conversations sprout at adjacent tables like controlled burns. Jack Sterling, the man who had humbled CEOs in boardrooms, who had made grown men cry during pitch meetings, has just been reduced to nothing by 20 seconds of impeccable French. Claire walks away with unshakable dignity, leaving Jack alone with his humiliation. For the first time in 2 decades, he doesn't know how to react. His usual weapons, money, connections, intimidation, seem pathetic against her quiet authority. Something fundamental in his perception of control has just cracked. In the weeks that follow, Jack discovers that obsession is a new sensation for him. He has always gotten what he wanted through strategy, resources, or pressure. Women, businesses, properties, everything eventually bent to his will. But Claire Chen has become an enigma that consumes his thoughts with a bewildering intensity. He mobilizes his network to run a background check on her, a decision he will later recognize as the first in a devastating series of mistakes. The report he receives is astonishing. Claire Chen, 29, a computer science graduate from MIT, with a specialization in machine learning, former senior programmer at Nexus Technologies, where she developed predictive analysis algorithms that revolutionized the financial industry. But there is a mysterious break in her professional narrative. 3 years ago, Claire simply disappeared from Silicon Valley. No official announcement, no transition to another company. One of the most brilliant minds of her generation, with a 7-figure salary and stock options that would be worth millions today, simply vanished from the tech world to wait tables at a high-end restaurant. Jack becomes obsessed with the details the report doesn't explain. Why would someone voluntarily abandon the tech paradise? What could force a genius programmer to trade algorithms for serving trays? Each unanswered question intensifies his need to understand, to possess, to decipher the mystery that is Claire Chen. The obsession manifests in ways that disrupt his disciplined routine. Jack finds himself returning to Terroir repeatedly, inventing excuses for business meetings just to see her. He studies her movements, memorizes her schedule, and observes how she interacts with other customers with a professionalism that never quite becomes warmth. His first attempt at an approach is a predictable disaster. Jack shows up on a slow afternoon when Claire is clearing tables near the bar. He approaches with the calculated charm that has seduced investors and rivals for years, prepared to offer a sophisticated apology, and perhaps an invitation to dinner somewhere even more exclusive. "Claire," he begins, using her name as if it were a magic key. "I need to apologize for what happened last week. It was completely inappropriate of me." She stops wiping the table and looks at him with a neutral expression that reveals nothing. "Your apology is accepted, Mr. Sterling. May I get back to work now?" But Jack makes the fatal mistake of his arrogance. He mentions the report. "I found out you worked at Nexus Technologies, predictive algorithms, MIT, an impressive resume. I was curious why someone with your talent would choose..." "Choose what?" Claire's voice is like ice. "To serve people like you?" The contempt in her voice is more painful than any public humiliation. She takes a step closer, and Jack realizes he has made a terrible mistake. "You had my life investigated?" Each word is pronounced with surgical precision. "You thought money and connections would give you access to my secrets? That you could buy me like you buy your other conquests?" Jack tries to explain, but Claire continues with rising intensity. "Do you know the difference between us, Mr. Sterling? I voluntarily walked away from a world that destroys people. You've never had the courage to even question if you should." She leaves the question hanging in the air like an indictment, picks up her cleaning supplies, and walks away, leaving Jack alone with the realization that he has just made any future approach impossible. The months that follow are the most frustrating of Jack Sterling's life. For the first time, money, power, and connections prove utterly useless. He can't buy Claire's interest, can't use his influence to force proximity, can't apply pressure through third parties. She is immune to every strategy that made him one of the most powerful men in Silicon Valley. The obsession evolves into something deeper and more unsettling: self-examination. Jack begins to question not just how to win Claire, but why she affects him so profoundly. He has executed billion-dollar corporate acquisitions with less emotional intensity than he is dedicating to deciphering a waitress who despises him. During his growing insomnia, Jack finds himself researching Claire's academic work from MIT. Her papers on ethics in artificial intelligence are brilliant and prophetic, warning of risks the industry had completely ignored. She was writing about algorithmic accountability years before the term went mainstream, questioning whether technological innovation justifies human collateral damage. Reading her work, Jack begins to understand the mind behind the woman who rejected him. Claire isn't just intelligent. She is conscientious in a way none of his Silicon Valley peers could even comprehend. She saw consequences where others saw only opportunity. The most disturbing revelation comes when Jack digs deeper into her departure from Nexus Technologies. Through industry contacts, he uncovers fragments of the truth. Claire's predictive algorithm was sold to a lending company that used it to identify vulnerable families, offering predatory loans that resulted in thousands of foreclosures. Claire discovered the misuse of her code and tried to intervene, but Nexus had already licensed the technology with clauses that made revocation impossible. Families lost their homes, small business owners went bankrupt, and entire communities were devastated by an algorithm she had created to help financial institutions assess risk more accurately. The guilt destroyed her. Jack finds records of Claire's desperate attempts to reverse the damage, offering to return her salary, renouncing her stock options, even suing her own company. Nothing worked. The legal system protected corporate profits, not human victims, so she just disappeared. Jack spends nights awake processing this information. He has funded dozens of companies that caused similar harm, but he never lost sleep considering the human consequences. For him, disruption had always been a euphemism for breaking old systems and profiting from the pieces. Claire saw the faces behind the data. This gradual understanding of Claire's character deepens his obsession, but it also plants the seeds of something unprecedented in his psyche: doubt about his own choices. For the first time, Jack questions whether building a fortune through disruption is heroism or a sophisticated form of sociopathy. He tries more subtle approaches. He starts frequenting other restaurants where Claire might be working, hoping for casual encounters. He studies philosophy and tech ethics, preparing conversations that might demonstrate a moral evolution. He reads books on corporate responsibility as if they were conquest manuals. Nothing works. Claire maintains an impeccable professional distance whenever he appears, treating him with a cold courtesy that is more painful than open hostility. She sees him clearly, a predator trying to adapt his strategies for new prey. The frustration climaxes on a rainy afternoon in December. Jack is at Terroir again, ostensibly for a business meeting but really just hoping for a glimpse of Claire. She serves coffee at his table with mechanical efficiency, avoiding eye contact. Desperate, Jack whispers, "Please, just give me a chance to prove I can be different." Claire stops abruptly, as if something in his voice has pierced her defenses. She studies him for a long moment, and Jack sees something beyond contempt in her eyes, perhaps curiosity, or pity, or simply the weariness of carrying so much weight alone. Different how? Her voice is softer, less sharp. "I don't know yet," Jack admits with an honesty that surprises even himself. "But you've shown me there are questions I've never asked myself, about what really matters, about the price of ambition." Claire remains motionless for what feels like an eternity. Then, unexpectedly, a ghost of a smile crosses her lips, the first one Jack has ever seen on her. "Do you know that Neruda poem?" she asks suddenly. "Love, how many roads to travel to reach a kiss?" Jack knows it. He's read all of Neruda's work looking for ways to impress her, but the way she quotes the line touches a deeper memory, a connection to beauty that predates his obsession with power. "Yes," he replies simply. Claire watches him with a new intensity, as if she's recalculating complex equations. "There's a place where I can see who you really are, beyond the expensive suits and the billion-dollar deals. If you really want to know me, meet me there." She pauses, considering whether to continue. "The Oakland Museum of California, Sunday at 10 a.m., the exhibit on the social impact of technology. If you show up, we'll talk. If you don't, stop stalking me." It's both a challenge and an opportunity. Claire is offering neutral ground, far from the world of power where Jack feels invincible. It's an invitation to be vulnerable, to be judged not by his wealth or influence, but by something more fundamental. Jack feels a mix of terror and excitement he hasn't experienced since his first days as an entrepreneur, when every decision determined survival or failure. Except now, the stakes are higher, not just money, but the possibility of an authentic connection with someone who sees through all his masks. "I'll be there," he promises. Claire gives a nearly imperceptible nod, then turns to continue her work. But something has shifted in the atmosphere between them. A door has opened, if only a crack. Jack leaves the restaurant knowing that Sunday will not just be a date, but a test. Claire has offered him the chance to prove he can exist beyond his power persona. It's the first time in decades he will have to show up not as a CEO or an investor, but simply as a man. The prospect is simultaneously terrifying and liberating. For the first time since he built his empire, Jack Sterling will have to find out who he really is when all the layers of wealth and power are stripped away. Claire's invitation is more than a romantic opportunity. It's an invitation to be reborn. And Jack, to his own surprise, finds he is desperate to accept. The Oakland Museum of California is utterly foreign territory for Jack Sterling. He is used to private galleries in Manhattan, exclusive auctions in London, and vernissages where the networking is worth more than the art. This public museum, with middle-class families exploring educational exhibits and children running through the halls, represents a world his wealth has always shielded him from. Jack arrives 15 minutes early, a corporate habit that now feels out of place. He's wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, his attempt at dressing down that still screams expensive sophistication. He feels like an actor playing a role he hasn't properly studied. Claire appears promptly at 10. Wearing genuinely faded jeans and a simple t-shirt that makes her look younger and more vulnerable than she does in her professional uniform. For the first time, Jack sees her outside the context of work, and the difference is stunning. Her movements are more relaxed, her face less guarded. "You came," she observes with genuine surprise. "I promised I would," Jack replies, and realizes that keeping a simple promise is a new experience for someone accustomed to negotiating everything. The exhibit, Silicon Valley, Innovation and Impact, is brutally honest about the consequences of the tech revolution. Panels document how algorithms perpetuate racial bias, how social media amplifies disinformation, and how the gig economy has made work more precarious for millions. It's a systematic critique of the world that made Jack a billionaire. They walk in silence past the first few displays. Jack feels increasingly uncomfortable, recognizing companies he funded, technologies he helped develop, and decisions he made with an exclusive focus on financial return. It's like watching a trial of his own professional life. "This must be hard to see," Claire comments softly, noting his tense expression in front of a display about industrial automation and structural unemployment. "Why?" Jack tries to maintain a neutral tone. "Because you funded at least 3 of the companies mentioned here." She knows him better than he imagined. Claire has done her own research, mapped his investments, and understood exactly who he is in the ecosystem she abandoned. The realization is both impressive and terrifying. "And that bothers you?" he asks. Claire stops in front of an interactive installation that lets visitors experiment with resume screening algorithms, demonstrating how AI can discriminate against candidates based on zip codes, names, or educational history. "It bothers me that smart people make destructive choices out of moral laziness," she replies after a long pause. "You all know that technology has consequences. You just choose not to think about them." "And you did," Jack states. "I thought too much." For the first time, real vulnerability surfaces in Claire's voice. "I developed algorithms believing that math was neutral, that optimization would always be beneficial, that intelligent systems would automatically make fair decisions." They stop before the exhibit's most powerful section: personal stories of people affected by predatory algorithms. Photographs of evicted families, bankrupted small business owners, and students rejected by biased automated systems. "Do you recognize any of these stories?" Claire asks softly. Jack studies the photos more closely and feels his stomach churn. Some of the companies mentioned are direct investments of Sterling and Thorne. He helped fund the systems that destroyed these lives, but he never bothered to investigate the real human impact. "My algorithm is represented here," Claire continues, pointing to a panel on predatory lending. "The Martinez family, from Oakland. They lost their home because my code identified them as ideal candidates for a loan they knew they couldn't afford. I had optimized the algorithm to maximize approvals, not to protect vulnerable borrowers." Her voice breaks slightly. "Maria Martinez was 45, had 3 kids, worked as a housekeeper. My code calculated that she would pay for at least 2 years before defaulting, long enough for the company to profit even with the eventual foreclosure. Perfect math. Systematic cruelty." Jack watches Claire struggle with emotions she has clearly carried for years. It's the first time he's seen her completely unguarded, and her pain is more real than any suffering he has ever witnessed in his privileged life. "What happened when you found out?" he asks. "I tried to fix it. I offered to return all the money I'd made. I renounced my stock. I tried to sue Nexus to force changes to the algorithm. Nothing worked. The legal system protects innovation and profits, not victims." "Andy," Claire turns away from the panel and walks to a quieter area of the museum. Jack follows, realizing she is sharing something she has likely never fully verbalized. "The worst part was realizing I wasn't naive," she continues. "I was convenient. I chose not to ask the hard questions because the answers would have complicated my work. It's easier to optimize an algorithm when you don't think about the faces behind the data." "That's why you walked away from it all." "Huh?" "I walked away because I realized I was part of the problem. That all our justifications about moving fast and breaking things were just sophisticated ways of avoiding moral responsibility." They sit on a bench in front of a window overlooking the Oakland estuary. Across the water, the skyscrapers of San Francisco glitter in the morning sun, symbols of the technological power they both know intimately, for very different reasons. "So now what?" Jack asks. "You're just going to carry this guilt forever?" "I'm trying to figure out how to live with it," Claire answers honestly. "Waiting tables isn't penance. It's simplicity. It's doing something tangible, immediate, that can't be weaponized to destroy lives." Jack processes this in silence. For the first time, he understands that Claire is not just a conquest to be won, but a person carrying a real burden, making difficult choices about how to exist ethically in a complicated world. "Can I ask you something?" she says suddenly. "Of course. Why do you do what you do? Not the money. You already have more than you could ever spend. Not the power. You already control more than anyone should. What really drives you?" It's a question no one has ever asked Jack, including himself. He had always assumed that ambition was self-evident, that growth and domination were goals that needed no justification. He stops, realizing he has no honest answer. It's always been about winning, about being the smartest, the fastest, the most successful person in the room. But now that you ask, I'm not sure what I'm competing against anymore. Claire studies him with an expression that mixes curiosity with something that might be compassion. Maybe it's time to find out, she suggests. They spend the next 3 hours talking in a way Jack has never experienced. No hidden agendas, no negotiation tactics, no objectives beyond mutual understanding. Claire talks about her childhood, the daughter of immigrants who saw technology as the promise of social mobility. Jack shares memories of loneliness at expensive boarding schools, of parents who measured love through academic and financial achievements. Gradually, Jack realizes he is being judged by an entirely new set of criteria. Claire isn't impressed by his connections or his net worth. She's evaluating his sincerity, his curiosity, his capacity for moral growth. It's a test more challenging than any corporate negotiation. When they finally leave the museum, something fundamental has shifted between them. It isn't romance, not yet, but it is mutual recognition. Claire has seen Jack's authentic vulnerability. He has witnessed her moral depth, finally understanding why she is immune to his usual charms. "Thank you for today," Claire says as they reach the parking lot. "Thank you for showing me this," Jack replies. And for the first time in years, his gratitude is completely genuine. "Jack," she says before turning to leave, "if you really want to be different, you're going to have to decide what that means. I can't make that choice for you." She leaves, and Jack is left alone with questions he had never considered fundamental. For the first time in decades, he is not sure who he is or who he wants to be. In the months following the museum date, Jack Sterling embarks on the strangest experience of his adult life, genuine self-discovery. For the first time, he isn't optimizing for a specific outcome, impressing investors, closing a deal, dominating competitors. He is simply trying to understand who he could be beyond his power persona. The process begins with small gestures his colleagues dismiss as temporary eccentricities. Jack starts reading the social impact reports of the companies in his portfolio, documents he once had assistants summarize into bullet points. He discovers disturbing stories, algorithms that deny health insurance based on social media data, apps that facilitate the exploitation of migrant workers, platforms that amplify hate speech because engagement drives ad revenue. Each discovery is a small stab to his self-image. Jack had always seen himself as a visionary, funding innovations that would improve the world. Now he realizes he has often funded sophisticated, systemic cruelty disguised as technological progress. Claire sets a careful pace for their meetings, once a week, always on neutral ground. Museums, libraries, independent coffee shops in Oakland, where the conversation matters more than the setting. She's educating him, Jack realizes, but so subtly that he only recognizes the pedagogy in hindsight. During one particularly revealing meeting at the Berkeley Library, Claire challenges him to explain the difference between innovation and improvement. "You all use disruptive, as if it's always a positive," she observes. "But disruption means breaking existing systems. The question you never ask is, did those systems serve important purposes for people who can't afford the alternative?" Jack has no convincing answer. His entire career has been built on the premise that change is inherently good, that efficiency justifies any human cost, that markets will eventually benefit everyone through some economic alchemy he never deeply questioned. "Have you ever visited the communities affected by your investments?" Claire asks during another meeting. "What do you mean?" "The families foreclosed on by loan approval algorithms, the Uber drivers living in their cars because they can't make rent, the Amazon warehouse workers developing repetitive stress injuries because algorithms optimize productivity beyond human limits." Jack never has. It never occurred to him that he should. His world is spreadsheets and presentations, not the physical consequences of abstract decisions. "Would you like to meet some of them?" Claire offers. It's a test, Jack knows, but it's also a chance to understand the true cost of his success. He agrees. The experience is devastating. Claire takes him to meet Maria Martinez, the woman whose story he saw in the museum. She still lives in Oakland, now in a tiny apartment she shares with 2 other families, still paying off the debt from the predatory loan that cost her her home. Maria doesn't recognize Jack, but when Claire explains her connection to the algorithm that approved the loan, she shares her story with a dignity that breaks his heart. She worked 3 jobs trying to pay the impossible mortgage, lost weight from worry, developed ulcers, and watched her children question why smart people would do something so cruel to working families. "I don't understand," Maria says, looking directly at Jack. "How can people who have never met my family make decisions that destroy our lives?" Jack cannot answer. For the first time in decades, he has no corporate justification, no communication strategy, no philosophical rationalization. He is face to face with the real harm caused by his abstract pursuit of profit. The conversation with Maria marks a psychological turning point for Jack. In the following weeks, he finds himself questioning not just specific investments, but the entire moral architecture of his professional life. If he has built a fortune on systemic suffering, what does that make him? If his intelligence primarily serves to exploit human vulnerabilities, is it really a virtue? Claire watches his existential crisis with a mixture of compassion and cautious hope. "It's painful, isn't it?" she comments during a walk through the Berkeley Rose Garden, discovering you might have been the villain of your own story. "How did you get through it?" Jack asks. "I'm still getting through it," Claire admits. "But at least now I know the pain means my conscience is still working." Jack's transformation does not go unnoticed in his professional circles. Marcus Thorne, his partner at Sterling & Thorne Capital, initially dismisses the changes as a temporary phase, a sophisticated midlife crisis that will pass once Jack tires of performative philanthropy. But when Jack starts questioning potential investments based on their social impact, when he rejects profitable deals for ethical reasons, Marcus realizes something deeper is happening. Concern turns to alarm when Jack proposes creating an ethical review committee for all future investments. "You're losing your edge," Marcus confronts him during a tense meeting. "Our job is to maximize returns for our investors, not to save the world. Leave philanthropy for after you retire." "What if philanthropy and investment don't have to be separate?" Jack counters. "What if we could fund innovations that actually improve lives instead of just generating profit?" "Then you'll go broke," Marcus replies coldly. "And you'll take our firm with you." The tension between the partners coincides with a pivotal moment for Jack and Claire. After months of carefully planned meetings, of conversations that have gradually stripped away layers of defense and pretense, something deeper emerges between them. It happens on a rainy afternoon in an independent Berkeley bookstore. They are discussing a book on the history of programming when Jack realizes he is no longer trying to impress Claire. He's not performing a better version of himself. He is simply being honest about his confusion, his fears, and his clumsy attempts at moral growth. "You've changed," Claire observes suddenly. "How so?" "The first day we met, every word you said was calculated for effect. Now you just talk like a real person with real doubts." Jack realizes she's right. The mask of ruthless confidence he has worn for decades has slowly dissolved over the course of their meetings. He feels more vulnerable, but also more authentic than he has ever been. "Claire," he says suddenly, the words unplanned, "I'm falling in love with you." She stops thumbing through the book and looks up at him, her expression unreadable. "Not with the woman I imagined you were," Jack continues quickly. "With the real person, with your integrity, your courage to live by your values even when it's painful. You've shown me there's a different way to be in the world." Claire remains silent for a long moment, processing his confession. Then, unexpectedly, her eyes well up with tears. "Jack," she whispers, "I'm falling in love with you too. Not with the billionaire, but with the man who's trying to figure out who he really is." They kiss right there, between dusty shelves and the smell of old books. It's a moment of authentic connection that neither has experienced before. A love built on a mutual recognition of vulnerability and growth, not on projections or fantasies. But the intimate moment is cut short when Jack gets an urgent call from his office. Marcus is calling an emergency board meeting, something about a media expose. When Jack arrives at Sterling & Thorne Capital, he discovers that someone has leaked information about his meetings with Claire, including photographs of them together in various public places. The tech press is buzzing with speculation about a romance that may be affecting the judgment of one of Silicon Valley's most influential VCs. Marcus is furious. "You've become a public liability," he confronts Jack in front of the board. "Investors are questioning your focus. Competitors are exploiting a perception of weakness. And now we find out you're involved with someone who has a history of antagonism toward the tech industry." "Claire is not an antagonist," Jack defends. "She's conscientious. She's a former programmer who quit the industry after a moral breakdown," Marcus retorts. "And now she's influencing your investment decisions. That is a clear conflict of interest." The meeting becomes a direct confrontation between two visions for Sterling & Thorne Capital. Marcus represents the status quo, aggressive growth, profit maximization, market domination. Jack, influenced by Claire, proposes an ethical evolution, responsible investing, consideration of social impact, a balance between financial return and human benefit. The pressure culminates when Marcus presents an ultimatum: choose her or this firm. You can't make them both work. Jack realizes he has reached the moment Claire predicted months ago. He must decide who he really is, the ruthless investor who built a fortune through disruption that often meant exploitation, or the man who discovered a conscience through love. His answer surprises even himself. If having a conscience is incompatible with our business, then maybe our business is the problem. It's a declaration of war. Jack knows Marcus will not accept an ethical transformation of the firm, and the investors will likely back the more traditional approach. But for the first time in decades, Jack is making a decision based on values rather than strategic calculation. He leaves the meeting knowing he has chosen Claire and everything she represents: integrity, moral growth, the possibility of building something meaningful instead of just profitable. It is a point of no return that will define not only his financial future, but his fundamental identity. The decision is simultaneously liberating and terrifying. Jack finally knows who he wants to be, but he has yet to find out if he's brave enough to pay the price for that choice. The declared war between Jack and Marcus for the soul of Sterling and Thorne Capital unfolds with a corporate brutality that surprises even Jack, a 2-decade veteran of boardroom battles. Marcus isn't just an angry partner, he's a ruthless strategist who sees Jack's moral conversion as an existential threat to the billions under his management. The first volley comes through the tech press. Marcus orchestrates a subtle but devastating campaign, planting stories about Jack Sterling's midlife crisis in influential publications like TechCrunch and the Wall Street Journal. The articles frame his ethical transformation not as an evolution, but as the mental instability of a tycoon under the influence of a radical ex-programmer. Claire becomes a particular target. Investigative reporters dig up details of her exit from Nexus Technologies, painting her as a disgruntled employee who sabotaged her own career through counterproductive activism. Her decision to wait tables is presented as evidence of extreme anti-technology leanings. The pressure intensifies when Sterling and Thorne's key investors begin publicly questioning Jack's leadership. During a conference in Palo Alto, one limited partner asks him directly if personal considerations are compromising fiduciary decisions. Jack answers with an honesty that only makes the situation worse. If social responsibility compromises profits, maybe we should be questioning our business model, not our conscience. The response generates devastating headlines. Sterling questions capitalism model becomes a trending topic on Twitter. Marcus uses the controversy to call an emergency meeting with key investors, arguing that Jack has lost the perspective necessary for responsible fiduciary leadership. Jack and Claire's personal life deteriorates rapidly under the public scrutiny. Paparazzi follow Claire to work, turning her attempt to maintain a low profile into a media circus. Her colleagues at the restaurant become uncomfortable with the constant attention. Her manager, concerned about the impact on the staff, suggests she take a temporary leave of absence. "I've destroyed your life," Jack says during a painful conversation in Claire's San Francisco apartment. "You chose anonymity to escape this world, and I brought it right to your doorstep." "No," Claire replies firmly. "Marcus did. He's using our relationship as a weapon because he knows you finally found something more important than profit." But the stress takes its toll on them both. Jack is losing his grip on the company he co-founded, watching as Marcus consolidates power through strategic alliances with investors who value predictable returns over ethical experiments. Claire is losing her hard-won privacy, forced to publicly relive the professional trauma she tried to leave behind. The situation becomes untenable when Marcus plays his final card, an investment opportunity of historic magnitude. Nexus AI, ironically, a successor to the company where Claire once worked, has developed a revolutionary artificial intelligence system with the potential to completely transform industrial automation, medical analysis, and personalized education. Nexus AI's CEO, David Park, is a brilliant young idealist convinced his technology will democratize access to advanced artificial intelligence. He's seeking a $100 million investment for a global rollout, and Sterling and Thorne Capital is his first choice due to its reputation for identifying transformative technologies. Marcus sees the opportunity as the perfect way to demonstrate the difference between Jack's emotional leadership and the pragmatism necessary for corporate success. During a presentation to the board, he argues that refusing the investment on abstract scruples would be a criminal breach of fiduciary duty. "This technology is going to happen with or without us," Marcus declares. "The question is whether we want to profit from an innovation that will change the world, or if we're going to let our competitors reap the benefits because Jack is having an existential crisis." Jack finds himself in an impossible position. The Nexus AI technology is genuinely revolutionary and potentially beneficial. David Park seems sincere in his idealistic intentions. But Jack also knows, through the painful education Claire has given him, that powerful technologies inevitably find unintended applications. The same system that democratizes education could automate the jobs of millions of teachers. The AI that speeds up medical diagnoses could deny treatment based on biased algorithms. The automation that increases industrial productivity could displace entire communities of workers without offering viable alternatives. "Do you trust David Park?" Claire asks when Jack shares the dilemma. "I trust his intentions," Jack replies carefully, "but I don't trust the system that will fund, develop, and deploy his technology. Once we unleash a powerful AI into the world, we lose control over how it will be used." "So you're going to refuse?" "If I refuse, Marcus has enough votes on the board to oust me and approve the investment anyway. If I approve, I become complicit in consequences I can't predict or control." It's the perfect dilemma, a lose-lose scenario orchestrated by Marcus to force Jack to choose between his principles and his power. Either decision will validate the narrative that Jack has lost his capacity for effective leadership. The pressure climaxes during the final board meeting. Marcus presents an elegant ultimatum: vote to approve the Nexus AI investment and retain his position as co-CEO, or oppose it and be removed for fiduciary incompetence. "Gentlemen," Marcus addresses the board members, "we have come to a moment where we must choose between sentimentality and responsibility. Jack Sterling built this firm through pragmatic decisions based on rigorous market analysis. Recently, he has allowed personal considerations to cloud that judgment. The question before us is simple. Do we trust him to continue leading with the necessary objectivity?" Jack realizes that Marcus has framed the situation perfectly. It isn't just about one investment, it's about the fundamental definition of corporate leadership. He can keep his power by choosing traditional pragmatism, or he can follow his newly developed conscience and lose control of the company he built. The final realization is devastating. Marcus never intended to coexist with a more ethical version of Jack. This battle was planned from the moment Jack began questioning the firm's practices. His personal transformation is incompatible with the profit maximization that defines Sterling and Thorne's corporate identity. Jack is about to lose everything: his company, his fortune, his influence, because of a conscience that a waitress awakened in him with flawless French and unshakable integrity. The board vote takes place in a funereal silence. One by one, key investors Jack has known for decades vote against him. The math is brutal: 7 votes for Marcus, 3 for Jack. Sterling and Thorne Capital officially removes Jack Sterling from his executive positions, keeping him on only as partner emeritus, an honorary title with no real power. Marcus takes immediate control, approving the Nexus AI investment as his first act of new leadership. "Gentlemen," he announces to those present, "let's get back to business." Jack leaves the office he helped design, carrying only his personal belongings in a cardboard box, a cliché humiliation he never expected to feel so deeply. Employees avoid eye contact, already recalibrating their loyalties to the new power structure. 2 decades building an empire, destroyed in 2 hours of civilized voting. The tech press celebrates his downfall with barely disguised schadenfreude. Sterling falls when love conquers business sense becomes a viral headline. Columnists analyze his descent into irrelevance as a case study on the risks of mixing one's personal life with corporate decisions. Claire finds Jack at his Atherton home, sitting alone in the minimalist living room that suddenly feels like a mausoleum for dead ambitions. She offers no platitudes or easy solutions. She simply sits beside him and lets the shared silence express what words cannot. "I've lost everything," Jack finally verbalizes. "You've lost money and power," Claire corrects gently. "But you found out who you really are. That's not a loss. Easy for you to say when you haven't just been exiled from your own company." "Jack," Claire says firmly, "do you really believe Sterling and Thorne Capital represents who you want to be?" The question forces him to confront a reality he's been avoiding. Over the past few months, as he questioned the firm's practices, he gradually realized that much of his professional life had been an exercise in sophisticated exploitation. He funded innovations that enriched the few at the expense of the many, systematically preferring disruption over stability, growth over sustainability. "No," he admits, "but it was my life, my identity. Without Sterling and Thorne, who am I?" "That's exactly the question you need to answer," Claire responds. "And for the first time in decades, you have the freedom to discover an honest answer. But freedom feels more like vertigo to a man who has spent his entire adult life within clearly defined corporate structures." Jack finds himself experiencing an existential terror he never allowed himself to feel during his climb to power. Without meetings to attend, deals to structure, or competitions to win, who is he really? The following weeks are the hardest of Jack's life. A dense fog of depression settles in. He loses interest in the activities that previously defined him: networking events, industry conferences, financial news. Sleep becomes elusive. His appetite disappears. Claire quietly moves in to help him through what she recognizes as a necessary breakdown. You're grieving, she explains during one of the many sleepless nights. Not just for the company or the money. You're mourning the identity you've carried for decades. It's a natural process. How did you get through it? Jack asks. When you left Nexus? Badly, Claire admits. I spent months believing I had destroyed my life for nothing. That guilt without action was just self-indulgent suffering. It took years to discover that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what actually matters. During one particularly dark night, Jack confesses his deepest fear. What if I'm just a typical rich asshole having a late-life crisis? What if this entire transformation is just an elaborate self-deception? Claire considers the question seriously before responding. Do you remember Maria Martinez? Of course. When you met her, what did you feel? Jack recalls the encounter vividly. Shame, regret, a genuine desire to somehow repair the damage caused by the algorithms he funded. I felt responsible, culpable, like I owed her something I could never repay. Typical rich assholes don't feel responsible, Claire observes. They feel annoyed that their victims won't stay invisible. Your pain is evidence that your conscience is real. Slowly, through conversations with Claire and through the solitary reflection he had previously avoided, Jack begins to understand that his crisis is not a breakdown, but a breakthrough. For the first time in his adult life, he is being forced to confront fundamental questions about purpose, meaning, and legacy. What would you do? He asks Claire one evening. If you could start over? If you could use everything you've learned, all the resources you have access to build something genuinely beneficial? I would create systems that serve people instead of exploiting them, Claire responds without hesitation. I would prove that technology can increase human dignity instead of diminishing it. A spark of possibility ignites in Jack's mind. Not a return to Sterling and Thorne or an attempt to recreate his previous success, but something entirely new. A chance to apply his hard-learned lessons about ethical responsibility to building a company that measures success differently. Would you help me? He asks. Help you what? Build something different. Something that proves business and conscience aren't mutually exclusive. Claire studies his face carefully, looking for signs of manipulation or self-serving rationalization. Instead, she sees an exhausted man who has finally stopped performing and started genuinely questioning. Yes, she says simply, I would help you. For the first time in weeks, Jack feels a flicker of hope. Not to return to his old life, but to create a new one based on the values Claire helped him discover. It won't be easy, and success isn't guaranteed. But for the first time in decades, he knows exactly what he wants to build and why. The man who lost everything for love is beginning to understand that maybe everything he lost wasn't worth keeping. 6 months after his public humiliation, Jack Sterling returns to Silicon Valley, not as a conqueror seeking revenge, but as a transformed man with a revolutionary proposal. The Sterling Foundation for Ethical Technology is not just a company, it's a living manifesto that conscious capitalism can exist without sacrificing profitability or social impact. Together with Claire, now his partner in every sense of the word, Jack has developed an investment model that evaluates startups using a triple bottom line: financial return, measurable social benefit, and environmental sustainability. It's not philanthropy in disguise, but capitalism evolved, proving that ethical considerations can enhance rather than compromise business success. The final showdown takes place during an emergency board meeting at Sterling and Thorne Capital. Marcus called the meeting after discovering that Jack is directly competing for the deal with Nexus AI, offering an investment structure that David Park finds more aligned with his idealistic vision. You're sabotaging our firm, Marcus accuses as Jack enters the boardroom he frequented for 2 decades, using your personal connections to undermine deals you helped structure. I'm offering an alternative, Jack responds calmly. David Park has a choice between maximizing short-term returns or building a genuinely beneficial technology. He chose conscience. The board members watch tensely as the former partners engage in a confrontation that everyone knows will define the future of one of the most influential VC firms in the world. Marcus represents the traditional model: growth at any cost, disruption as an absolute virtue, shareholder primacy above all other considerations. Jack embodies an evolution that threatens the entire ecosystem. Your ethical foundation is a marketing stunt, Marcus declares dismissively. Investors want returns, not lectures about social responsibility. You're playing with other people's money to satisfy your personal guilt. Our first quarter performance suggests otherwise, Claire intervenes, presenting financial reports that prove ethical investing is not only viable, but superior in long-term sustainability. Companies that consider stakeholder impact beyond shareholder returns consistently outperform market averages. Marcus realizes that Jack has not returned as a defeated entrepreneur seeking redemption, but as a formidable competitor armed with a compelling alternative vision. Worse still, some board members seem genuinely interested in the metrics Claire is presenting. Choose! Jack offers a final ultimatum to his former colleagues. Continue extracting value through exploitation, or evolve with an industry that increasingly demands accountability. I'm not asking you to abandon profits. I'm proving that conscience and commerce are complementary, not competitive. The vote that follows is not a dramatic reversal, but a subtle shift in the power dynamics that Marcus never saw coming. 3 board members express interest in exploring a hybrid model that incorporates ethical guidelines without abandoning fiduciary responsibilities. It's a small victory, but a significant crack in the monolithic thinking that previously dominated the firm. In the months that follow, Jack and Claire build the Sterling Foundation methodically, proving that their idealistic vision can translate into a sustainable business model. Each investment decision is rigorously evaluated through a triple bottom-line analysis that considers financial returns alongside social impact and environmental sustainability. Their first major success comes through a partnership with a renewable energy startup developing affordable solar panels for low-income communities. Traditional VC firms had rejected the company because the profit margins were considered too slim, but Jack and Claire recognized that predictable government subsidies combined with a growing market demand created a compelling long-term opportunity. The investment proved spectacularly successful, generating both substantial returns and a measurable improvement in energy access for thousands of families. The media coverage focuses not just on the financial success, but on the innovative model that proves social good and profit maximization are not mutually exclusive. David Park becomes their marquee client, choosing the Sterling Foundation's ethical investment structure over Sterling & Thorn's traditional approach. His AI technology, developed under guidelines that prioritize transparency and accountability, launches to widespread acclaim and adoption. More importantly, the safeguards built into the development process prevent the discriminatory applications that have historically plagued algorithmic systems. Claire thrives in a role that combines her technical expertise with her hard-earned wisdom about technology's social implications. As Director of Impact Assessment, she develops frameworks that help startups identify and mitigate potential negative consequences before they occur, transforming after-the-fact damage control into proactive responsibility. You found your calling, Jack observes during a quiet evening in their shared office space in Oakland, deliberately chosen to maintain a connection with the communities most affected by technological change. We both did, Claire responds. The difference is, you had to lose everything first. Their personal relationship deepens alongside their professional partnership. Jack proposes at the location where their transformation began, the Oakland Museum, in front of the exhibit that first opened his eyes to the real costs of technological disruption. The ring belonged to his grandmother, a symbol of a commitment that transcends contemporary concerns about prenups or asset protection. Will you marry me? He asks simply, without the elaborate speeches or grand gestures that characterized his previous attempts to impress her. Yes, Claire answers, because a love built on mutual respect and shared values needs no dramatic declarations, only the quiet certainty that they have found in each other not just romantic partners, but true companions in life's most important work. The launch event for the Sterling Foundation's first annual Impact Report takes place not in an exclusive Palo Alto venue, but in a community center in Oakland, where many of their investment beneficiaries actually live and work. The symbolic choice reflects the fundamental shift in Jack's understanding of who deserves to be centered in conversations about technological progress. The event draws a fascinating mixture of attendees: traditional Silicon Valley investors curious about ethical investing trends, community organizers interested in accountability mechanisms, policymakers exploring regulatory frameworks, and families directly affected by the technologies the foundation helped develop responsibly. Jack opens the evening with a speech that would have been impossible for him to deliver 2 years earlier. Gone are the polished platitudes about disruption and innovation. Instead, he speaks honestly about his journey from exploitative capitalism to conscious business practices, acknowledging the harm caused by his previous investments while demonstrating concrete steps toward repair. Transformation isn't about becoming perfect, he tells the audience. It's about accepting responsibility for past mistakes while committing to better choices moving forward. Every technology we fund, every algorithm we help develop, every system we support, each one affects real people with real lives. Our job is to ensure that impact is beneficial, equitable, and sustainable. Claire follows with a presentation on the measurable outcomes achieved through the Foundation's first year of operations. The numbers are impressive: job creation in underserved communities, reduced environmental impact from supported technologies, increased access to essential services through ethical AI applications. But more importantly, she shares stories from families whose lives were improved rather than disrupted by responsible innovation. Maria Martinez appears as a surprise guest, sharing how a solar installation funded through a foundation partnership substantially reduced her energy costs, allowing her to save money for an eventual down payment on a new home. Her presence provides a powerful counterpoint to abstract discussions about social impact, concrete proof that ethical business practices can repair historical harms while generating sustainable profits. David Park demonstrates the latest version of his AI system, now enhanced with transparency features and bias detection mechanisms developed under foundation oversight. The technology that might have perpetuated discrimination under a traditional development model instead serves as a showcase for how responsible innovation can exceed both ethical and financial expectations. During the evening's climax, Marcus Thorne makes an unexpected appearance. Not to congratulate or reconcile, but to announce Sterling & Thorne Capital's decision to adopt a modified version of the Foundation's impact assessment framework for their own future investments. It is not a complete victory, but a recognition that ethical considerations can no longer be dismissed as irrelevant to serious business operations. Market forces are demanding accountability, Marcus admits during a brief conversation with Jack. You were early to a trend that's becoming inevitable. I still think you're an idealist, but you're not wrong about the future of the industry. The evening concludes with a commitment ceremony. Not a formal wedding, but a public declaration of the partnership between Jack and Claire that encompasses both their personal relationship and their professional collaboration. They exchange vows that reflect their shared values, a commitment to each other, to the communities they serve, and to building a future where technology enhances rather than diminishes human dignity. Professor Avery, Claire's former mentor, provides a blessing that captures the essence of their transformation. You have proven that love can indeed conquer, not through sentimental fantasy, but through the hard work of translating compassion into effective action. May your partnership continue to demonstrate that conscience and commerce can coexist beautifully. The final image is of Jack and Claire standing together in the community center, surrounded by the people whose lives were improved through their conscious choices about technology and investment. It is not a fairy tale ending, but something better. A mature recognition that meaningful work requires an ongoing commitment to growth, accountability, and service to something larger than personal ambition. They found not just love, but purpose. And in finding purpose together, they discovered that true wealth lies not in the accumulation of resources, but in their deployment for the benefit of all. Jack Sterling's journey proves that it's never too late to question the path we've chosen, and to have the courage to change it when we discover something better. His love for Claire wasn't just a romance. It was an awakening to the possibility of living with integrity, of building successes that don't cost the souls of others. In a world where technology shapes every aspect of our lives, their story reminds us that innovation without conscience is sophisticated destruction. But it also shows us hope, that people can change, companies can evolve, and the future can be built by those brave enough to choose what is right over what is merely profitable. If this story touched you, if you recognized in Jack the struggle between ambition and conscience, or in Claire the courage to live by your values even when it's costly, hit the like button to show that stories of genuine transformation deserve to be told. Subscribe to the channel for more narratives about people who chose to grow instead of just win, who found love through vulnerability and purpose through questioning. Share this with someone who needs to know that it's never too late to start over, that true success isn't measured in numbers alone, but in the positive impact we leave on the world. And in the comments, tell us your own story. When was the last time you questioned if you were on the right path? What, or who, awakened your conscience? Let's build a community of people who believe we can do better, be better, and create a future where technology serves humanity, not the other way around.